Hi everyone, welcome into our very special playoff prediction episode of Sun Times Game Week. Again, we're here at the Sun Times studio. We want to give a shout out to our content partner, ABC7, for sharing this on their Facebook Live right now. We've got a very exciting show. We're going to quickly go through some news right now, talk about our Super 25, but again, it's playoff football time, so we've got a lot to discuss. Let's get into the news really quick.
News, not a huge week of news. But I guess the big news, and a lot of people wouldn't say it's big because we don't talk about every commitment on this show, but Leo's Fred Cleveland committed to North Carolina A&T. I know everybody's very excited about that. But it's interesting because North Carolina A&T is a Division I program. Mm-hmm. And Fred Cleveland is one of those kids that nobody thought was big enough, was tall enough to ever play D1 basketball, and he is. He's excellent. He could be our player of the year. He's that good. He's a fantastic, fantastic player. He's one of those kids like, a Tyler Eulis or a Jerome Randall that's way under recruited, and we're going to be talking about him all winter long. He's a great player. He's probably going to take North Carolina A&T to the tournament while good old Illinois sits out on the sidelines again, and they'll be wondering what happened. So
Michael's predicted it first.
It's important that Fred Cleveland went D1, and it's a huge accomplishment for him. The other big basketball news was the G League. For those who are familiar with NBA stuff, they know what the G League is. It's going to start offering $125,000 contracts to high school players right after high school. No more college. The issue with this, though, is how they're going to select them, how many they're going to be. They said the elite players. So this could wind up being whoever the McDonald's committee picks.
Right.
We don't know how this is going to work. It could be only players who USA Basketball have invited in the camps over the last 4 years. So it'll be interesting to see how that all fleshes out. And if there is, I'm just kind of guessing here, there'd be a mid-level where maybe there's a $70,000 contract in a couple of years for the other kids, because that's when the floodgates open, when all of a sudden people are going to start choosing that over going to Illinois State or somewhere. So it's an interesting kind of first step to watch that, and it will have a big impact locally, I'm sure.
It's definitely going to be an interesting thing to watch how it affects it at the college level and locally, how our kids do with this new offer.
Our other news, football-wise, I wanted to mention, because we've talked about him so much, Ty Gavin, Notre Dame's Mr. Everything, Player of the Year candidate. He was hurt in Week 8. He did not play at all in Week 9 against Joliet Catholic. That was a must-win for Joliet Catholic, and they won. But Ty Gavin didn't play for Notre Dame. We are closely watching and trying to figure out when he will be back, and we'll let you know on Twitter as soon as we find that out. And the last piece of news, Annie wanted to update us on
Tom Walsh. Yeah, we're getting into basketball season shortly here, and a kid to watch obviously is going to be Tom Walsh, dual sport athlete, does incredible things on the soccer field. He just completed his 18th shutout. Naperville North beat Neuqua Valley 3-0 and advanced to the sectional semis where they'll play Batavia in Geneva. So just an interesting storyline to watch. Naperville North is going for their third straight state championship. So that program, is a powerhouse. And if you're a soccer fan, that's definitely a team you want to watch.
You can read all about that. Annie did a story and a video on the site. Check out Tom Welch. Luckily, soccer ends before basketball starts, unlike football, so there will be no...
It was funny, though, because Tom talked about, soccer being his buffer, just to take his mind off basketball for 3 months out of the year. But he's so good. He's so good.
I think that's very mentally healthy.
Yeah,
because these other kids, I don't know how they do it. I mean
when it comes to
crazy.
AAU and basketball and playing all year round, it's very easy to get burnt out. And when you're at the high school level, I think a lot of athletes nowadays are forgetting that you can play two sports. Give yourself that luxury of playing two sports, and that's something that he's always taken advantage of. And it's not something he wanted to let go of in his high school career.
It's also a huge difference of opinion among college coaches, whether they like seeing an athlete play more than one sport or if they prefer an athlete to play just one sport. As someone who played several college sports, ran track and swam, I had so many coaches asking me about my other sports that I played, even though it wasn't they were recruiting me for it. It seemed to be a very positive thing. I think that's kind of shifted as the years have gone on, and now college coaches are very divided on that.
Yeah.
So it's interesting to see kids still doing it at a high level.
It's just blows my mind how good he is on the soccer field. His coach talked about him being able to go, anywhere he wanted, Division I, to play soccer, and he just chose basketball. So
what a problem to have.
Definitely an interesting, it'll be fun to watch him this basketball season as well. Let's get into football. got a lot to talk about, like we mentioned. Quickly, let's talk about the Super 25. We've got one new team in, but since this was the last week of the regular season of the Super 25, why don't you discuss with us what the main storyline of the Super 25 was this year?
I mean, the main storyline is 12 teams, and it got through 9-0, which is blows my mind a lot. And it's also mixed when people kind of talk to me about that. They're like, obviously the scheduling system is broken. That's one side. And the other side is like, man, there might be some really good teams this year. So I'm excited to see what piece of the spectrum is actually the case, why we have 12 9-0 teams in the rankings. And there's still a few 9-0 teams that are not even in the rankings, just based on strength of schedule, a few unknown things, so we could see that shake up in the next few weeks. So just the success of that.
Who was the new team in, and what got them in this last week?
The new team in is Warren, and to be honest with you, I'm kind of looking at them as in comparison to the 9-0 teams. They lost to Barrington in week 1. Barrington knocked off Maine South. Barrington was playing very good football to start the season and kind of leveled off as the season continued. Warren has won 8 straight games after starting the season with a loss. And I think that they have just as much momentum as any other 9-0 team out there. So I'm curious to see what they do in the playoffs.
Definitely will be interesting to see. There's a lot of playoff discussion we've got to get through, like we mentioned. If you have any questions, please send them our way. Let's get right to it. First up, we've got 1A.
Class 1A, I did my research because I didn't see any 1A football this year. I think I did last year, but basically the way we're going to break down these classes, we're going to try and stick to a format. We're going to talk about the favorite, then our pick to win, then kind of a dark horse underdog, then the best first round game, the possible first round upset, and then a fact, an actual fact after all of that opinion stuff at the end. So for 1A, the clear favorite, according to kind of the experts we saw on Comcast and everybody's picking Lena Winslow. They're 8-1. They are the number 4 seed. And there's some discussion about who they're going to be up against. Maybe Camp Point Central, maybe Arcola. But I think Lena Winslow is the clear pick for everybody. The dark horse is interesting because they're from our area. Aurora Christian, they're a small school, they play a fun style, and it's going to be interesting to see what they can do in this bracket. They do get a number 1 seed in the second round, Princeville, so it might not be the best road for them. The best first round game, Leroy at Orr. Orr is in the playoffs again, second year in a row. Leroy is going to have to come all the way up here and play at Orr. Orr has their own field on the west side, and that's a really weird, really interesting game. Orr is 8-1, not the best schedule, but we know James Madison is a great athlete. I covered him last year, so I'm kind of excited to see if Orr can get their first ever playoff win against Leroy. The possible first round upset is one of those kind of, we're going to see these a lot, where the seeds got things a little mixed up. I have a number 9 Aurora Christian, probably over number 8 Anawan would be the upset. And the nugget, the fact, 3 teams in the 32-team field have never won a playoff game, ever in school history. Edwards County, they're 0-6. Or, we mentioned, is 0-3, and Madison is 0-2. So we can watch and see if any of them get their
Someone's
first
gonna
win.
do it.
Someone is going to do it this year, those 3 teams.
Class 2A. Gibson City is all anybody talks about in this class. Maroa Forsyth is the other team that has some experience, and Decatur St. Teresa is another one to look at. But Gibson City, perennial power, they are our pick. They're everybody's pick. They're the favorite. Mentioned Decatur St. Teresa. They're the one to watch. They'd be the dark horse. And the first round game to watch, the best one, Knoxville is a number 9. They're coming to the west side to play Hope Academy, number 8. And that's interesting for a lot of reasons. Hope Academy, I watched them against Mount Carmel. They gave Mount Carmel a good game for like 3 quarters. I mean, that's a 2A team.
Right.
So Hope Academy, I think, has a real chance in this bracket. I think a better chance than a lot of people gave them credit for. And the fact that Knoxville has to come play at Hope Academy is culturally interesting because the teams from the suburbs last year wouldn't go play at Hope Academy. That's where the shooting was. Providence played, and then we had several Catholic League teams not want to play at Hope Academy. Knoxville apparently is going to go up there and play, so we'll see if that turns out, but it's one to watch. Our upset, Jacksonville Rout over Warrensburg Latham. I only picked that because I know someone who went to Jacksonville Rout.
His delivery on that was so
confident.
Yes.
No, Chris Bongino used to run the prep desk here at the Sun-Times, a big Jacksonville Rout guy, so we're going with them as Sun-Times unity. And the actual fact from Class 2A, Gibson City has averaged 49 points a game while only allowing 27. So that's
it's
how
easy to see why
dominant they've been.
Yeah, it's easy to
Is
see
no
why we
one
think
talking about
they're big.
Tuscola?
Yeah, I did see Dave Bernhard picked them, but everyone else is picking Gibson City.
Interesting. I'd watch out for Tuscola.
Beth likes Tuscola. All right.
That's take. That's Beth's hot take.
Another one of the smaller classes. We'll hit quickly here. Class 3A. Byron is the favorite. They're 9-0. They are actually in our coverage area. We do cover Byron. We haven't talked much about them this year. I think kind of the dark horse and my pick is going to be Carlinville. They got a little bit of talk on the Comcast show, and their numbers are amazing. They average 51 points a game and only allow 8. So that's just looking through all of the 256 teams and the spread, that's one of the most impressive we've seen. So we'll go with them. The best first round match, kind of interesting when I saw this on the brackets, Dwight at Lisle.
Oh, right.
Because Paul Barber was talking so much about wanting to coach somewhere like Dwight, and that's who they wind up playing.
Right, that's super interesting because he always talked about that small town atmosphere, and then he ends up at Lisle, which Lisle is smaller, but not Dwight.
Like
not that, not Dwight.
Dwight has to go to Lisle, and Dwight's a 13, so Lisle would be the favorite there. The upset in that one, going to have to kind of go against the public league a little bit, but Clark is a 7 seed. Clark on the west side. And I covered them this year. They're a fun team. They're a good team, but I'm not sure they're ready for some prime 3A playoff football. And they have to play Spring Valley Hall. So I'm guessing that might be a tough one for Clark. So that's the upset pick. And the fact on this one, Urban Prep Englewood, another team we've covered, another public league team, is quite the anomaly out of the whole 256 team field because they're actually allowing more points than they're scoring this season. And they managed to make the playoffs.
That's very interesting.
Yeah, they're allowing 17 and scoring 16. So
seems difficult.
How did this happen?
But they got into the playoffs, so good for them.
All right, up next, 4A. I think let's talk about IC Catholic.
Yeah, they are. I mean,
we can't.
I kind of joked about that. I'd like to see them play Lincoln Way East. I mean, I've never seen them lose in the last 4 years. I see them at state. They just dominate.
It's insane. Yeah. Like how has no team in Class 3A the past seasons, and now 4A, they move up, and they're still dominating the same way. Yeah,
they've got a great system. They had great athletes, too, over the last couple of years. And the big thing in this class is Rochester. They are the big dog in 4A. They've owned 4A. You know, can IC Catholic beat them? That was pretty much the main talking point for this one. Beth, what were your IC Catholic Rochester thoughts?
I would love to see that game. This year's IC Catholic team reminds me a bit of Phillips when they were playing in 4A, and it was one of those things where they really hadn't been tested all year. Was that 2 years ago, potentially? They hadn't been tested all year. They were blowing people out of the water just like IC Catholic has done this year, and they met Rochester, and Rochester just was such solid, predictable football. They couldn't beat them. It was like they knew exactly who they were keying in on. They know their assignments. They knew exactly the blocks they should be doing. And sometimes a team that isn't used to being down or even having like any points scored on them, which is kind of where IC Catholic is, gets really flustered when they get in that space. I think that's what we saw from Nazareth when they played Marist a couple weeks ago. So we'll see. I mean, I think that would be, I would love to watch that game, IC Catholic and Rochester, and I think it could go one of two ways. We see another blowout, another 49-0 win by IC Catholic, or we see a really, really close game.
It's hard because when you talk about IC Catholic, you talk about these instances where potentially it could be a good game, potentially this team.
They haven't been tested.
Team, right,
I don't
could
know.
Give them a good game, and then it's just
they've literally blown everybody out.
That's why it's funny to think
McNamara,
about.
That's the team that's interesting. McNamara lost in the last play of the game to IC Catholic, and nobody's really talking about them. They're on the other side of the bracket with Rochester. So Rochester's going to have to get by a Bishop McNamara team that's down in Kankakee, who almost was able to beat IC Catholic. So I think they're the clear dark horse pick in this one to watch. Yeah, they've got an excellent
if Rochester
chance.
goes all the way to the state championship game, there's a real solid chance they win. But the years that someone knocks them out and they don't have to play that other 1 seed is when we've seen, a new champion in 3 or 4 or whatever it is that year. So
is there anyone though on IC's side that could potentially knock them out before the state championship?
Coal City's having just a great year. They just demolished Paul Parfit's Lisle team in week 9, so I think they're worth watching.
Richmond Burton's decent most years, and they kind of stay in their area, so we really don't know what they look like, nor have they seen many Chicago area teams.
Yeah, IC Catholic's road looks pretty good. The best first round matchup, I just kind of blindly picked Heron at Pontiac for all of our friends in Pontiac. They love football. They're finally back. So that's like a storied Illinois program, much like Joliet Catholic, who's now back on the upswing. So that should be a lot of fun there. And the upset, I have Johnsburg, a number 10 seed over Ag Science, the number 7 seed. Sorry, Ag Science, but I saw Johnsburg beat Phillips a couple of years ago.
Johnsburg's good.
Yeah, so that might be a tough one for Ag Science, although it'll be in Chicago. They're going to be the late game at Gately, it looks like.
I'm pretty sure that's where they beat Phillips too.
Yeah.
In Chicago.
No, it was in Johnsburg. I will never forget it because I froze to death and was snowed on in Johnsburg.
And the next year when they played again was the opposite result then.
It was quite the, there were a lot of pickup trucks and country music at halftime. And
sounds about right.
Johnsburg, you scarred Michael.
It was, Phillips and I were both a little rattled by our night in Johnsburg.
By the environment in Johnsburg.
Let's put it that way.
Us city folk aren't used to the pickup trucks and the country music.
Well, no, they had a parade of them before the game around the field. It was strange.
Pickup trucks are common trend in towns like that.
On the field?
I guess that's
Yeah, it was strange.
Why not?
But the fact for 4A for you, Rochester, who we talked about, they've won 7 state titles. So, there's a reason why so many people pick Rochester. So we'll see if the Rochester IC Catholic thing happens.
Next classification to break down is a classification where, we have a lot of teams involved, 5A. What do you got for us, Michael?
This was the most boring of
boring?
all the classes. Even like the teams we knew less about and the other ones, there was something interesting. But man, 5A just looks like this Montini-Hillcrest collision course. I haven't seen anybody else pick any other state title game. And we've seen Montini, we saw them beat Loyola. I have not seen Hillcrest yet. It's interesting. This was, to me, the toughest one to pick, probably because I haven't seen Hillcrest. But I'm going to go with them. I'm going to go with Hillcrest. Their numbers this year have been phenomenal. They haven't been challenged, though, so that could be an issue.
I'm going to go with Montini. I haven't seen Hillcrest, so like you said, I don't have much to weigh in on Hillcrest, but Montini's road to the state championship game is just, it looks like a cakewalk. Peyton's the number 1 seed. They went undefeated, but the thing you got to talk about when talking about them being the number 1 seed is the fact that they haven't been tested at all. And when you look at a team like Montini, who's a 4 seed, they get tested all season long. So my pick is definitely Montini.
I'd pick Montini. A little fact about Hillcrest, though, they've been averaging 42 points a game on offense and allowing 12, so that's a pretty nice combination of those two. Montini, though, when we talk about strength of schedule, that is what Montini has to their credit. Yeah. They're a 5A team that was 1 game away from winning the CCL Blue, which is arguably the best conference in the state most years. So I have to go with Montini. I think they have the athletes to really dominate 5A this year.
Game to watch?
I had Back of the Yards at Elmwood Park. I want to see if Back of the Yards can get their first playoff win ever. It seems like that, Elmwood Park, it's a winnable, maybe one. It's going to be just a great yardstick, measuring stick for them to see how far the program has come. I think the upset I've got here is Joliet Catholic over Metamora. Joliet Catholic's just a 14 seed, and I wouldn't be surprised if they were the 3rd or 4th best team in this entire class, the way it shakes out. And I think we were talking about the roads. Hillcrest might wind up with a very, very far away quarterfinal. They wound up on the south side of this bracket. The brackets are broken down north and south, and so that could mean them having to travel to Carbondale. That's very far.
Right.
Maybe a Champaign, maybe somewhere, whereas Montini is going to be able to play in our local area the whole way through, so that's got to be a big help. I'm still going to pick Hillcrest, but you got to worry about having to play a game down there.
Some interesting
fact, Joliet Catholic has won 13 state titles. The other 31 teams in the entire field all together have only won 13. So that's how much more dominant.
If I'm looking at this from Hillcrest perspective, that's the game that I'm going to circle, is if I get to match up against Joliet Catholic, because that team has every piece to be good. There's a reason why they were ranked in the Super 25 to start the year. I know they lost one of their running backs due to injury, but They've owned their style of play for years. They're back on their style of play. They're on the upswing. This is like a team that reminds me a bit of Naperville Central, in 2015, where they lost 4 games during the regular season and then won all the way through the 8A state championship. I think Joliet Catholic has that potential, especially in a field like this.
So we're looking at a possible semis of Hillcrest Joliet Catholic and Montini against Sterling.
Yeah.
Yeah, that'd be my guess probably.
We've got 10 minutes left. Let's move on to 6A because 6A,
Yeah.
7A, 8A obviously are,
6A, I think, is one of the more interesting ones. Every single person I've seen has picked Cary Grove against Richards as the title game. And there's one big monster team that nobody's talking about.
And
Phillips. Remember all that preseason hype? Remember all those great athletes they have?
Yes.
I mean, and I saw Cary Grove. I don't see any way that Cary Grove is a favorite at all over Phillips personally.
What do you think the biggest difference between those two teams are that could put one over the other? Cary Grove and
Phillips is bigger everywhere. And I think
More athletic.
Yeah, and I think they're really getting undersold. I mean, I'm not sure they were even mentioned on the big preview show the
If
other
I'm
night.
Phillips, this is exactly where I want to be.
Yeah.
They have had the spotlight on them for the last 3 years, probably. This is, I could not have asked for a better seed. I won't want to face Richards. That's my pick in this bracket. Richards, I think, is the best team in this entire class, maybe even several other classes included. They have breezed through the season. They have athletes that are going to the Big Ten. They're just as talented as Phillips, and they wind up on the opposite side of the bracket too.
So Phillips, Richards, is that what?
I'm picking Phillips as the winner.
I would love to see a Phillips-Richards state title game.
I would love to see a Phillips-Richards state title game as well. I picked Richards as my team in this classification. All right, dark horse.
Dark horse, Notre Dame, depends on Ty Gavin's health.
Right,
pick
that's a
too.
huge factor.
But
I
we've
agree.
seen how good they can be with him. I think the best first round game, this was a tough one. As good of and as interesting as this bracket is, I didn't see a really great first round game. I went with Crystal Lake South at Kenwood.
I went with Prairie Ridge, Hinsdale South.
Yeah, that might be
I
all
think that's
right.
going to be a really good game.
I picked Crystal Lake South at Kenwood as well. I think that'll be an interesting game to watch.
The fact about this one, Von Steuben is in this bracket. They just started football 4 years ago, and they're in the
for them.
playoffs. I mean, that's pretty amazing. Don't think they're going to have much luck at Caneland, but just getting there after 4 years is pretty amazing.
I think another game to watch though in 6A is Crete Monee versus Bloomington. Did you guys?
Yeah, I don't know anything about Bloomington, which is why
I mean, Crete Monee challenged themselves the entire season. They played Lincoln Way East, I think, in week 1. Their record is 6-3, but again, they challenged themselves. So when you come into the playoffs and are a lower seeded team, you have to look at, how, again, they were challenged, and I think that'll be an interesting game to watch.
Crete Monee is always a good playoff team, as is Lamont, which is another one that I'd keep my eye on. They started off 0-2 on the season, and they have closed very well. To be honest, I saw the first 2 games, and I was like, Lamont is out of the picture this year. I think they're back in the picture, so I would also keep them in the conversation.
All right, 7A, what do we got?
Well, this is the most loaded bracket,
Yeah,
I think.
for sure.
Probably the most opinions. It seems like most people out there are going with East St. Louis in this one. But Batavia's there, who, that's Beth's pick. Mount Carmel, Nazareth.
Simeon?
Simeon. This one is completely loaded. But I think Beth's favorite is Batavia. Most people are going with East St. Louis. East St. Louis, I'm going to give the fact real quick. They've scored more than 70 points 3 times this year.
Wow.
They haven't lost to anybody in this state, and they went to Ohio and played Massillon. It's one of the most famous programs in the entire country, and they just lost 46-40. So they've definitely been tested. East St. Louis is a great program, but that would be a heck of a title game.
It would be a very fun title game. And if I'm East St. Louis, I highly doubt they've seen anything like Batavia's defense, so it could be a really, really fun game.
I think you can't count Simeon out of this conversation, though. I think if they can get past Nazareth and Batavia obviously are going to be huge challenges for them, but do we think that those are games they can't win?
I think they can win. I have Simeon as my biggest sleeper here. It's going to